After 2 months away, I came home early and found my feverish daughter sleeping in the laundry room with a thin towel for a blanket. I'd sent $4,800 a month for her care, but her bedroom was now a playroom for my brother's kids. Mom said, "Let her shake. Weak kids don't deserve beds." Dad added, "Your brother's children matter. Yours can rot with the laundry." I locked the door and said, "Nobody leaves." What happened next made them beg before sunrise. The television was the only light in the house when I turned my key at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. I set my duffel on the porch and stepped inside. The living room was warm and cluttered in a way it had not been 2 months ago. A gaming controller on the couch, a pair of boys' sneakers by the recliner, size too big for my daughter. A Nerf gun on the carpet next to a juice box with the straw still in it. None of these belonged to Scout. My daughter was 5. She wore size 11 shoes and drew pictures of birds and owned a yellow raincoat with a duck hood that she had picked out herself the week before I left. Nothing in this room said she lived here. I walked past the couch. My father Dodd was in the recliner with his chin on his chest, half asleep. My mother Vonnie was folding laundry, watching a home renovation show with the volume low. Neither of them looked up when I came in, which meant neither of them expected me for 4 more days. My contract in Indianapolis had ended early because the hospital overstaffed the unit for September. And I had driven 4 hours without calling ahead because I wanted to see my daughter's face before she saw mine. "Where's Scout?" Vonnie did not turn her head. "Sleeping. Where?" "Where she sleeps, Hadley." I walked down the hall. Scout's bedroom door was closed, and behind it I heard the electronic ping of a tablet game. I opened the door. 2 children I recognized as my brother Tripp's kids were asleep on a bunk bed that had not existed in this room when I left. Mason, 8, was on the top bunk with a tablet glowing on his pillow. Kinley, 6, was on the bottom with a stuffed bear. The walls had been repainted from lavender to gray. The butterfly decals I had put up for Scout were gone, covered by a Minecraft poster and a foam basketball hoop. Scout's dresser was in the closet, shoved behind a plastic bin of Legos. Scout's room was not Scout's room anymore. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. The back porch, where Scout sometimes sat with her drawing pad on warm nights. Empty. Then I heard a sound from the laundry room. Not a cry, a breath. The kind of small, labored breath that a body makes when it is working harder than it should. I had spent 9 years in intensive care units, and I knew the sound of a child breathing through a constricted airway the way a mechanic knows the sound of a belt about to snap. I opened the laundry room door. Scout was on the floor between the washing machine and the dryer. She was curled on her side with her knees pulled to her chest, wearing her yellow raincoat over her pajamas, the one with the duck hood, the hood pulled up over her hair. Beneath her head was a thin bath towel folded once. Her face was the color of candle wax except for 2 red patches on her cheekbones, and her lips were cracked at the corners. And every breath had a faint wheeze underneath it that I could hear from the doorway. I knelt beside her and pressed my palm to her forehead. 102.8. 9 years of ICU shifts taught me to read a fever through skin contact, and this one had been building for days, not hours. Her pulse was rapid under my fingertips. Her breathing was shallow. The wheeze meant her airways were tightening because my daughter was asthmatic, and the inhaler that was supposed to prevent exactly this was somewhere in this house with a fill date I was about to check. I reached into her purple backpack, the one I had packed for her 2 months ago, still sitting on the dryer where someone had set it and forgotten it. The inhaler was inside. I shook it. Nearly empty. I checked the pharmacy label. Last filled June 12, 2024. The canister should have been refilled in July and again in August. 2 missed refills. I had sent $180 every single month specifically for this prescription, built into the $4,800 I transferred to my mother's account on the first of each month, and nobody in this house had walked into a pharmacy. I picked Scout up. She weighed almost nothing against my chest. She had been 42 pounds when I left in July, healthy, laughing, holding her inhaler in one hand and the yellow raincoat in the other. She felt like 38 now, maybe less, and the difference between 42 and 38 pounds on a 5-year-old is not a number. It is 3 meals a day that did not happen. I carried her into the living room. Vani looked up from the laundry pile. Dodd opened one eye. She has 102.8 fever, I said. How long? Vani folded a shirt without looking at Scout. She's been fussy. Kids get warm. How long, Mom? A couple of days. Maybe since Wednesday. She wouldn't eat dinner, so I put her down early. You put her in the laundry room. The kids needed the bedroom. Your brother's children needed a place to sleep, and Scout's room was the only one with space for the bunk bed. She's fine on the floor. I put a towel down. A towel. On linoleum, for a 5-year-old with 102-degree fever and an empty inhaler. Vani set the shirt on the pile and looked at me with the flat patience of a woman who had already decided she was right before the conversation started. Let her shake. Weak kids don't deserve beds. The room changed temperature, not the air, something behind it. The sentence did not land like words. It landed like a lock turning. Because behind that sentence was every choice my mother had ever made that put my brother's comfort above my daughter's survival, and she had said it while Scout's fever burned through a yellow raincoat on a laundry room floor 6 feet from a dryer that was warmer than anything they gave her to sleep under. Dodd leaned forward in the recliner, not concerned, irritated, the way a man gets irritated when he is woken up during a show to deal with a problem he considers already solved. Your brother's children matter. Yours can rot with the laundry. I looked at my father. He had said it the way he said everything, with the heavy certainty of a man who has never been questioned in his own house. Scout was still against my chest, her forehead hot through my scrub top, the yellow hood pressed into my collarbone, and my father had just told me that my daughter could rot. I did not answer either of them. I walked to my car, got the fleece blanket from the back seat, wrapped Scout in it on the couch, and propped her head on a pillow. Her breathing steadied slightly. The wheeze was still there, but quieter. I checked her pulse again. Still fast. She needed a new inhaler tonight, and she needed fluids, and she needed a doctor in the morning, and she needed to never sleep on that floor again. Welcome to Family Secret Tales, where quiet mothers carry the heaviest evidence. If you have ever trusted your family with the thing you love most and come home to find them sleeping on a floor, subscribe now and stay close. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, because this door is about to lock. My name is Hadley Creed. I am 31 years old, and I am a travel EQ nurse, which means I go where hospitals need critical care staff, and I stay for 8 to 12 weeks, and I do the work that keeps people breathing when their own bodies have decided to stop. I am good at my job. I can read a blood gas in 4 seconds, titrate a vasopressor drip without looking at the pump, and tell you whether a patient is declining 6 hours before the monitor agrees with me. I have held the hands of strangers while they died, and I have held the hands of strangers while they came back, and none of it, not one shift in 9 years, prepared me for kneeling on a laundry room floor and pressing my palm to my own daughter's burning forehead while she slept in the only warm thing I ever bought her. The contract in Indianapolis had been 2 months. Good hospital, good unit, $6,200 a week after taxes. I took it because Scout's medical bills from her last asthma flare had wiped my savings, and 2 months at that rate would rebuild everything. I arranged care the way a responsible parent arranges care. I drove Scout to my parents' house in Louisville with a packed bag containing her clothes, her drawing pad, her inhaler, her vitamins, and the yellow raincoat she refused to take off in the car. I sat in the kitchen with Vani and Dodd and explained Scout's medication schedule, her dietary needs, her bedtime routine, her asthma triggers. I set up a $4,800 monthly transfer to Vonnie's bank account, which covered Scout's food, prescriptions, clothing, and a generous surplus for the household. I kissed my daughter at the door and told her I would call every night and be back before the leaves turned. Val Soren, my oldest friend, had driven down from her apartment to see us off that day in July. Val taught art at the same high school we had both attended, and she was the person I called when a shift went bad, and the person I texted when a shift went well, and the person who had been sitting in my kitchen the night Scout was born, folding onesies while I timed contractions and trying not to cry because she was happier about my daughter than anyone in my family had ever been. The week before I left for Indianapolis, Val came over with a set of watercolor pencils and a sketch pad and sat on the kitchen floor with Scout for an hour. She taught Scout to shade by tilting the pencil, the way she taught her students, and when Scout got it right on the third try, Val looked at me over Scout's head and said, "She has your hands, Had, steady ones. She'll be fine." That sentence carried me through 57 ICU shifts. I replayed it in hotel rooms and hospital break rooms, and on every night when calling Scout and hearing Vonnie's voice instead felt like a wall between me and the one thing I was working for. I called Scout every night from Indianapolis. For the first 3 weeks, she talked about birds she had seen and pictures she was drawing. After week 4, the calls got shorter. She stopped mentioning the drawing pad. By week 6, Vonnie was answering for her. "She's tired. She's in bed already. She's playing with her cousins." I did not know she had cousins in the house because nobody told me Tripp and Deanna and their 2 children had moved in. Nobody told me Scout's room had been converted. Nobody told me my $4,800 a month was paying for anything other than my daughter's care. I found out the way you always find out in this family, by walking through the door and seeing it for myself. I stood in the living room at 10:30 on a Saturday night with Scout wrapped in a fleece on the couch and my parents watching me from their seats. Tripp was in the kitchen. I had heard him come downstairs when I raised my voice about the inhaler. His wife Deanna was behind him, holding a glass of water, not drinking it. I walked to the front door and turned the deadbolt. The click was the loudest sound in the house. Nobody leaves this house until I know where $9,600 went. Vonnie's eyes went to the door. Dodd sat up straighter. Tripp leaned against the kitchen doorframe and crossed his arms, the posture of a man who believed he was about to watch his sister embarrass herself. "You sent that money for the household," Vonnie said, "for all of us. Tripp's kids eat too. The lights are on. The water runs. You sent money and we used it. I sent money for Scout, $4,800 a month. 2 months. I want to see where it went." "That's ridiculous. I don't keep receipts. You don't have to." I never left the banking app. I pulled out my phone. The family banking app that Vonnie had added me to 3 years ago so I could monitor Scout's expenses when I traveled. The same app Vonnie had apparently forgotten I could access, because every transaction for the last 2 months was still there. Time-stamped, categorized, and linked to the card on file. I read them out loud, not fast, slowly the way I read vital signs to a resident who has missed something critical. July 9th, Visa payment, $2,200, Tripp's credit card. I looked at Tripp, he did not blink. July 15th, Amazon, $460. Deanna's account. Deanna set her water glass on the counter with both hands. July 22nd. Ford Motor Credit, $585. I looked at my father. His hand tightened on the armrest. August 1st. Visa again. $2,200. August 8th. Amazon, $940. August 15th. Ford Motor Credit, $585. I let each number sit in the room long enough for the room to feel it. In 2 months, you spent $4,400 paying down Tripp's credit card debt. $2,800 went to Amazon purchases under Deanna's name. $1,170 went to a Ford Motor Credit car loan. The remaining $1,230 went to groceries and electric. 0 went to Scout's inhaler refill at $23.40 a month. 0 went to her prescriptions. 0 went to a single item with my daughter's name attached to it. Deanna's chin dropped. She stared at the floor the way a person stares when the number they hoped nobody would add up is being added up in front of them. The Amazon charges were hers. $2,800 in 2 months. I had seen the boxes in the hallway on my way in, 3 of them, unopened, stacked next to the laundry room door. 3 boxes next to the door where my daughter slept. Vonnie's jaw tightened. I fed your daughter every day. That money covered the whole household. You put her in a laundry room. Because your brother needed the bedroom. My brother needed the bedroom. The man who is standing in my parents' kitchen at 10:30 at night because he was evicted from his apartment 3 months ago for not paying rent. That brother. Tripp unfolded his arms. That's none of your business. It became my business when you put your bunk bed in my daughter's room and moved her to a floor. Tripp stepped forward. His face had the heat that comes before a speech he had been building since I walked in. You dump your kid on mom and dad for 2 months so you can wipe strangers' drool in some hospital 3 states away. And then you come home at midnight acting like Mother of the Year. Deanna is here every day. My kids are here. Your girl sat in the corner and drew pictures because nobody in this house had time for her. And that is not our fault, Hadley, that is yours. You left first. Deanna flinched behind him, not at the words, at the volume. She had the posture of a woman who had watched this speech rehearsed and knew it was coming, and did not agree with every line, but had decided to stand behind it anyway because the alternative was standing alone. I almost reached for my phone and called 911 right there. My thumb found the screen, and my chest wanted the sirens and the uniforms and the official record. Because what Tripp had just said about my daughter sitting in a corner drawing pictures while nobody had time for her was the kind of sentence that a person says when they know what they did to a child and have decided it was the child's fault. But the yellow raincoat on the couch stopped me. Scout was asleep inside it, and sirens would wake her. And I was not going to let my daughter hear the sound of her family being taken apart until I had finished taking it apart myself. Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If you are the parent who sent the money, packed the bag, made the calls, and still came home to find your child on a floor, this story is yours. Hit subscribe because the receipts are about to speak. And numbers do not lie the way families do. The Ford Motor Credit payment, I said. $585 a month. That's a car loan. Dodd's hand tightened on the armrest, the first time he had moved since I locked the door. Dad, whose name is on that loan? He did not answer. Vonnie looked at the television. Tripp looked at the floor. I called Ford Motor Credit from the hospital 3 weeks ago because I saw the charge on the app and did not recognize it. The automated system read me the account summary. The loan is for a 2023 Ford F-150. $31,000. Co-signed by Dodd Creed. Primary borrower Tripp Creed. Tripp made 2 payments and defaulted since June, Dad. You have been making the $585 monthly payments from the account I funded for my daughter's care. I pointed through the kitchen window at the driveway. The F-150 sat under the streetlight. Chrome bumper, dealer plate still on, not a scratch. That truck is parked 20 feet from the laundry room. My daughter's inhaler costs $23.40 a month. Your truck payment costs $585. You chose the truck. Tripp's jaw tightened. The truck is not about Scout. Everything in this house is about Scout, Tripp, because everything in this house was paid for with her money. The credit card debt you brought here when you got evicted. The Amazon boxes stacked in the hallway. The bunk bed in her bedroom. The truck in the driveway. All of it runs on $4. $800 a month that I sent for a 5-year-old girl who is right now sleeping on this couch in a raincoat because nobody spent $23.40 to refill her inhaler. Dodd's voice came out rough, The truck is an investment. Trip needs transportation to find work. Trip has been living here since March. 6 months. How many job interviews has the truck driven him to, Dad? The television played a commercial for kitchen cabinets. Scout coughed once on the couch, the wet bark of a child whose lungs were not getting the medication they needed. Every person in that room heard it. Nobody moved. I almost stood up and carried Scout out of the house right then, keys in one hand, daughter in the other, headlights pointing east. But the pharmacy was not open until morning, and Scout needed a new inhaler before she needed a new address, and I was not leaving this room until every person in it understood exactly what they had done with their hands and their silence. Deanna spoke for the first time. Her voice was thin, and she directed it at the floor. I told her to take Scout to the doctor. Trip turned. Deanna on Wednesday. When the fever started, Scout was sitting at the dinner table and she put her head down on her arms and she was shaking, Hadley, shaking. I told your mother to call the pediatrician because the child was clearly sick, and she looked at me and said Scout was fine and to let her sweat it out. Those were her words. Let her sweat it out. Deanna, shut up. Deanna did not shut up. Something in her had shifted the way things shift in people who have been carrying a secret that was never theirs to carry. And now the room was open and she was going to set it down. I told her again on Thursday when Scout wouldn't eat breakfast. She ate 3 bites of toast and pushed the plate away, and your mother said picky kids go hungry. On Thursday night, Vonnie moved Scout to the laundry room because Mason said her coughing was keeping him awake. And I said, Vonnie, she needs a doctor. And your mother told me to mind my own business because Scout was not my child. It's not our kid, Trip said, repeating it as if the sentence were a legal defense instead of an admission. She is 5 years old, Trip. She was burning up and wearing a raincoat and sleeping on a floor, and your mother decided that was acceptable because your children had the bedroom. Trip's fists clenched at his sides. He looked at Deanna the way a man looks at a person who has just taken the foundation out from under the house he built his story on. The room went still. Vonnie did not deny it. She sat on the couch with the laundry pile between her and her granddaughter, and she did not deny a single word, because Deanna had been the only person in this house willing to say what happened. And Vonnie had been counting on her silence the way she counted on Hadley's money. Both had run out tonight. 3 days. I let the number sit in the room like a patient on a monitor with a flat line. You knew my daughter had a fever for 3 days. You did not call me. You did not call her doctor. You moved her to a laundry room floor because her coughing bothered your grandson. And you kept cashing my checks. Vonnie's chin lifted. The performance came back. The chin, the shoulders, the voice that sounded like authority but was built on the same sand as everything else in this house. I am raising 4 grandchildren in this house while you travel to hospitals and play nurse. I make the decisions here. I decide who sleeps where. I decided what was practical. Practical? You are using the word practical to describe a 5-year-old with an empty inhaler sleeping on linoleum in a raincoat. She had a towel, a thin bath towel on a cold floor in a room next to a dryer, while your other grandchildren slept in the bed I bought her, with the blankets I packed for her, in the room I painted for her. That is what you call practical. You were not here, Hadley. You were 3 states away earning money and feeling important. Do not come into my house and tell me I failed when you are the one who left. I left so I could pay for her care. You took the money and spent it on Trip's truck and Deanna's Amazon orders and a credit card bill that has nothing to do with my daughter. You did not fail because I left. You failed because you chose to. I almost believed her for half a second. The steadiness in her voice, the set of her jaw, the way she could say the word practical while a 5-year-old with 102-degree fever slept 6 feet away in a raincoat. But the bank records on my phone screen stopped me because practical was a word for managing resources, and Vonnie had not managed a single resource toward the child she was paid to protect. I turned to my father. Dad, you co-signed a $31,000 car loan for Trip, and you have been paying it from my account since June. You knew Scout's room was gone. You knew she was sleeping on the floor. You saw her cough at the dinner table, and you did not take her to a doctor. And when I walked in tonight and told you my daughter had 102.8 fever, your answer was that she could rot with the laundry. Dodd's hands went flat on the armrests. His jaw worked once, the way it does when a man is trying to find a sentence that will make 3 months of choices sound like parenting instead of what they were. His shoulders dropped. Then his right knee started bouncing, the involuntary tremor of a body that has run out of arguments before the mouth has. His face lost its color from the ears inward, a slow drain that made him look 10 years older in 10 seconds. He looked at the F-150 through the kitchen window, the truck that cost $585 a month, and then at the couch where Scout slept in a $12 raincoat. And his eyes went wet, and he pressed the heels of his hands into his kneecaps the way a man does when he is trying to hold his legs still and failing. "I kept her fed," he said. His voice cracked on the word fed, and the crack told everyone in the room what Dodd already knew, which was that feeding a child scraps from a table where 2 other children ate first was not the same thing as keeping her fed. Vonnie tried to climb back on top. "You are always dramatic, Hadley. Everything is an emergency with you. Everything is a crisis. You are a nurse, and you see patients everywhere, even in your own daughter. Scout had a cold. Children get colds. Children with asthma do not get colds, Mom. They get bronchial episodes that close their airways. Scout's peak flow would be in the red zone right now if anyone in this house owned a peak flow meter, which they would if anyone had spent the $23.40 it costs to refill her prescription. You are making this bigger than it is. My daughter lost 4 pounds in 2 months. Her inhaler has been empty since August because nobody refilled it. Her fever has been running for 3 days. You moved her to a linoleum floor so your grandson could sleep without hearing her cough. Tell me what size this is, Mom. Tell me the right size for that." Vonnie did not answer. She picked up the shirt she had been folding when I walked in. She folded it again, slower this time, as if the act of folding could restore the order that the last hour had taken apart. I picked up Scout's inhaler from the coffee table. I held it up so the pharmacy label faced both of them. Last filled June 12. 2 missed refills. $23.40 each. Nobody called it in. The raincoat was her blanket. $9,600, and my daughter slept on your laundry room floor. The room heard every word. Trip moved first. He pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up. "I'm calling the police. You locked us in this house. This is unlawful restraint. You came home at midnight, and you are holding us against our will." I held up my own phone. The screen showed a CPS emergency intake confirmation. Case number, timestamp, reporting party, Hadley Creed, ARN mandatory reporter. Filed 12 minutes ago while Deanna was talking, while the room was watching Deanna and not watching me type. "I already filed. You can call whoever you want, Trip. CPS has the pharmacy records, the bank statements, and the photographs I took of the laundry room before I picked my daughter up. The caseworker will be here before sunrise." Trip lowered his phone. He did not dial. Vonnie stood up from the couch. The laundry pile fell. She took 1 step toward me and stopped. "You will destroy this family. You put my daughter on a floor. She is fine. Children sleep on floors. I slept on a floor. You slept on a floor when your brother needed your room for his model trains. This is what families do. I was 9. Scout is 5. And I did not have a fever and an empty inhaler and a mother who told the only person willing to help to mind her own business." Vonnie opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She looked at Scout on the couch, at the yellow raincoat pulled up to her chin, at the face that was still flushed and still breathing in that thin wheeze, and for 1 second my mother's performance cracked, and something underneath it looked like a woman who knew exactly what she had done. The second passed. She sat back down and put her hands in her lap and stared at the television that nobody was watching. At 2:15 in the morning, the house went quiet. Trip and Deanna had gone upstairs without speaking to each other. Vonnie sat at the kitchen table with her hands flat. Dodd had not moved from the recliner. I sat on the floor next to the couch where Scout slept and typed my formal nursing documentation into my phone the way I wrote patient charts. Objective, specific, timestamp, child found on laundry room floor at 10:08 p.m. Temperature 102.8. Weight estimated 38 lbs, down from 42 lbs documented at last well child visit, July 1, 2024. Prescription inhaler last filled June 12, 2024. No refills attempted in 3 months. Financial support of $4,800/month sent by reporting party. With documentation of diversion. I attached the photographs. I attached the bank records. I saved the file and emailed it to myself and to the CPS case number I had been given during the intake I filed 2 hours earlier. I called Val Soren at 2:45 in the morning. She answered on the first ring because Val always answered on the first ring, and because she had been the one who told me, when I took the contract, if anything feels wrong when you get back, call me before you call anyone else. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for 8 seconds. Then she said, "I'm packing Scout's things. I'll be there in 20 minutes. At 4:10, I drove to the 24-hour Walgreens on Bardstown Road with Scout asleep in her car seat. I walked to the pharmacy window and handed them the prescription number I had memorized the week Scout was diagnosed. The pharmacist filled the new albuterol inhaler in 7 minutes. $23.40 with insurance, the same $23.40 that Vonnie could have spent at any pharmacy in Louisville at any point in the last 3 months, and did not. Val was in the driveway when I got back, her hatchback trunk open, a duffel bag of Scout's clothes inside. She had packed it from the plastic bins in the closet of what used to be Scout's room, working around Mason's Legos and Kinley's bear. Pulling out butterfly shirts and tiny jeans and a drawing pad that still had Scout's last picture in it, a bird with wide wings and a yellow body. Val set the duffel on my back seat and looked at the house and did not say a word. She did not need to. Her face said everything her mouth would not. At 5:35, Goss arrived. Gray sedan, no markings, clipboard. She was a woman in her 40s with reading glasses and the unhurried pace of someone who had seen every version of this story and was no longer surprised by any of them. She introduced herself, asked to see the child, and checked Scout's temperature and breathing before she looked at anything else. Then she walked through the house. She saw the laundry room, the towel still on the floor, the backpack on the dryer. She saw Scout's bedroom, now a playroom, bunk bed, gray walls, Minecraft poster where the butterflies had been. She saw the F-150 in the driveway. She saw the gaming controller on the couch and the juice box on the carpet, and the house full of evidence that 2 children had been cared for and 1 had not. She interviewed Vonnie in the kitchen. Vonnie tried her speech, family disagreement, dramatic daughter, children sleep on floors, Scout was fine. Goss wrote without expression. Vonnie's voice got faster. She was cared for. She was loved. She had food and a roof and a family around her. My daughter is overreacting because she is a nurse and she sees emergencies everywhere. Goss looked up from her clipboard for the first time. "Ma'am, the child's inhaler has not been refilled since June. Her fever has been running for approximately 72 hours without medical intervention. She was found sleeping on a laundry room floor. I need to document the living conditions, and I need to speak with each adult in the household separately." Vonnie sat down at the kitchen table. Her hands went flat on the surface the same way Dodd's had gone flat on the armrests 5 hours earlier, and for the first time since I had known my mother, she had nothing to say. Tripp tried to leave through the back door at 5:50. Goss looked up from her notes. I'd recommend staying, sir. I'll need to speak with everyone in the household, including your wife. Tripp stayed. Deanna looked at the floor. Dodd came to me on the back porch at 5:15 before Goss started the formal interviews. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and his voice lower than I had ever heard it. Hadley, please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them Scout was being cared for. We can fix this. Your mother can fix this. The room will go back. The inhaler will be filled. We will do whatever you want. Just tell the caseworker it was a misunderstanding. I looked at my father. The man who had told me 4 hours ago that my daughter could rot with the laundry was standing in his own doorway at 5 in the morning, asking me to lie to a government caseworker so that the consequences of what he did to a child would not attach to his name. You had $9,600 in 3 months, Dad. You had every chance to fix this before I walked through the door. He went back inside. Vonnie tried next, at 5:25, standing in the kitchen with her church cardigan buttoned wrong, and her voice stripped of every performance it had carried since I arrived. I am begging you, Hadley, please. She is my granddaughter. I love her. You put her on a floor. I made a mistake. You made a mistake for 3 days while she had a fever and you told Deanna to let her sweat it out. That is not a mistake, Mom. That is a choice. Vonnie turned away. She walked to the playroom and sat on Scout's old bed, the bed that should have held my daughter and now held Legos and Tripp's children's shoes. She sat there until Goss found her. Mrs. Keating opened her kitchen curtain at 5:40. She was Vonnie's church acquaintance from across the street, the woman Vonnie had told in August, Scout is having the best summer of her life. Mrs. Keating saw the gray sedan in the driveway. She saw Goss walking the property with a clipboard. She looked at the Creed house with the expression of a woman who was recalculating every conversation she had ever had with the person who lived there. She did not wave. The fallout came in 3 registers. The financial register was arithmetic, and arithmetic does not negotiate. The $9,600 was documented as diverted. Goss's report included the bank statements as exhibits. Dodd's car loan payments of $585 per month from Hadley's designated childcare funds constituted unauthorized use. The DF's investigator who called Dodd the following Tuesday used the phrase misappropriation of funds designated for a minor 3 times in a 4-minute phone call. Tripp's $12,400 in credit card debt, paid with Scout's money, became a line item in the investigation file. Ford Motor Credit was notified that the co-signer's funding source was contested, and the $585 payment bounced the following month. The F-150 that sat in the driveway while Scout slept on linoleum was repossessed on a Tuesday in October. Tripp stood in the driveway watching the flatbed load it while Dodd sat in the kitchen staring at the table where he had written no checks and made no calls and done nothing for 3 months except collect $4,800 from a daughter who trusted him. The social register was slower, but just as permanent. Mrs. Keating told one person at First Baptist on Sunday. By Wednesday, the casserole chain that Vonnie had coordinated for 15 years sent a card to Hadley's new address instead. It was signed by 11 women. None of them signed one for Vonnie. The pew where Vonnie and Dodd sat every Sunday remained empty for 3 weeks, and nobody asked why because everybody already knew. Deanna's mother called from out of state asking what happened, and when Deanna told her, her mother drove to Louisville the next weekend and took Mason and Kinley back to Paducah without asking Tripp's permission. Vonnie sat on Scout's old bed at 5 in the morning while Goss interviewed Dodd in the kitchen. The bed was still in the playroom, shoved against the wall, half buried under Mason's Lego bins and Kinley's unicorn blanket. The sheets underneath were still Scout's, still had the butterfly pattern Hadley had picked out at Target, still smelled like children's shampoo and the warmth of a child who had slept there every night until someone decided she did not deserve to. Vonnie held the thin towel from the laundry room folded in her lap. She folded it and folded it again without unfolding it first, pressing the creases flat with her palms, smaller and smaller, as if making the towel disappear could make the laundry room disappear and the fever disappear, and the sound of Goss's pen on her clipboard disappear. Through the wall, Dodd's voice answered questions in a monotone that Vonnie had never heard from him before. Because Dodd had never been asked questions by someone whose clipboard determined what happened next. 2 weeks later, Vonnie left a voicemail. 43 seconds. She said she had put Scout's bed back in the bedroom. She said she had refilled the inhaler. She said things would be different. She said the word please 4 times, each one quieter than the last. I listened to it once, looked at Scout drawing at the kitchen table of the 1-bedroom apartment Val had helped me find on Frankfort Avenue. The one with the radiator that clicked at night, and the window that faced east, and the bedroom that was small enough for Scout to touch both walls if she stood in the middle and stretched. It was not much. It was hers. The yellow raincoat hung on the back of the kitchen chair. The new inhaler sat on the counter. The 24-hour pharmacy receipt for $23. 40 was pinned to the fridge with a magnet that said Louisville, and it was the most important receipt in the apartment because it proved that keeping a child breathing cost less than a single Amazon order, and nobody in the Creed household had been willing to pay it. I deleted the voicemail and set the phone face down. Some doors closed from the inside. In the Creed house, the playroom was still a playroom. Tripp's kids were gone, sent to Deanna's mother in Paducah, and the bunk bed sat empty in a room painted gray over lavender. Scout's butterfly decals were still under the paint if you looked closely, small ridges where the edges had not been sanded. The hook by the front door where Scout used to hang her yellow raincoat was empty, and nobody had hung anything on it since. The F-150 was gone from the driveway. The space where it had been was just oil stains on concrete and a dead spot in the gravel. Dodd sat in his recliner most evenings now, with the television on and the volume low, and Vonnie folded laundry that nobody was wearing on a couch where nobody sat. And the laundry room door stayed closed because neither of them could look at the floor. On Frankfort Avenue, Scout looked up from her drawing. "Mama, are we staying here? We're staying here. Do I get a bed?" "You have a bed, baby. You're sleeping in it tonight." Scout went back to drawing. She was drawing a house. The house had a big bed in it and a yellow bird on the roof. And the sun in the corner of the page had 2 lines coming off it that looked like arms reaching down. She had been drawing birds since the day Val gave her the first set of colored pencils when she was 3, and she had not stopped even when they put her in a laundry room, because drawing was the one thing nobody had taken from her, and she was not giving it up. I almost called my mother back that night. My finger hovered over the voicemail notification for 10 seconds, while Scout slept in the bed I had assembled from an IKEA box Val brought in her trunk. The bed had a guardrail on one side and a fitted sheet with clouds on it and a pillow that smelled like nothing but new, and Scout had climbed into it and pulled the yellow raincoat over her like a blanket, even though she had a real blanket now, because the raincoat was the thing she trusted, the thing that had been warm when nothing else was. The image of my daughter choosing a raincoat over a blanket stopped me. A child does not choose a raincoat over a blanket unless a blanket has been taken from her so many times that she stopped believing in blankets. I put the phone down. The inhaler sat on the nightstand. Full canister. 120 doses. $23.40. The price of keeping a child breathing. That Sunday morning, Val drove over with kolaches from the bakery on Bardstown Road and a set of colored pencils she had picked up from the art supply store where she bought materials for her students. She sat on the floor next to Scout and drew birds with her for 40 minutes while I drank coffee at the counter and watched my daughter laugh for the first time in 2 months. The yellow raincoat hung on the back of the kitchen chair, clean now, the duck hood facing the window. The inhalers sat on the counter with the cap on. The apartment was small, and the furniture was all borrowed, and the walls were bare, and it was the safest place Scout had been since July. "She has your hands," Val said, watching Scout shade a wing with the side of a pencil. "Steady ones." Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If this story reminded you that a child deserves more than a floor, more than a towel, more than being told to rot, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.